Hello everyone and welcome to my deck. Please excuse the fact that my neighbors are mowing their lawn. I don't particularly care. So this is going to be a video response to Kara's video response of Thorn's video response to Christopher Penzak's blog. Because I like to make things extremely easy on everybody to understand. This is basically a video about my experience of finding witchcraft and my path of witchcraft and things like that, and how that generation, my generation of witchcraft, not being related to the fact that I'm a 90s child or a millennial. It's literally related to when I found the craft in general. So in order to understand where I found the craft, how I found the craft, when I found the craft, and how that affects me now, it's kind of important to understand a little bit of where I'm from and what I do, like what year I was born and stuff. So I was born in 1992, and I was born outside of I was born in the town, but like I lived and was raised outside of a small town in a Bible Belt sort of area of New Brunswick in Canada. So I didn't really have much access to much. Growing up, I had 3 channels on the television, and one day we magically had 4. It was very exciting, which was CBC, CBS, PBS, and CTV. So I only had 4 channels. So growing up in the 90s, I didn't have access to Charmed or Buffy the Vampire Slayer or I didn't even see the Craft till much later, because it was a scary movie and I was not into scary movies. Like, I thought that I didn't like horror movies at all. So I ended up just not watching it at all. And so I never really was exposed to witchcraft much at all as a child, beyond like The Wizard of Oz and The Witch and the Wizard of Oz and things like that. So it wasn't until much later that I actually learned about witchcraft in general at all. So that was probably about high school, early high school. I was definitely into like weird pagan-y witchy type stuff before, but like to actually like find any form of witchcraft at all was definitely like 2006. So in 2006, I was in 9th grade. And in 9th grade, I found a website online. It was one of those ones with like rainbow font, like the font, like each line was like a different color half the time. Each article was written in a different color, with like the big background being like stars, and then like the background of the text that you could actually read, it was black, and and it was just like a place where people could post spells and bloggy type stuff and ideas and stuff like that. So it was like a collection of things submitted by people who read the website. I don't remember what this website was. I used to go to it so much back in 2006 and 2007, and that is what I initially found. Through that, I also found Witchfox. I never posted on Witchfox because, again, I was in 9th grade. I was 13, 14 when I found it, and I was like terrified of predators on the internet that you've been warned about so much, you know? So I ended up not posting to anything like that. I did look at Witchfox to see what was in my area. There was never anything in my town. There was occasionally things in the city, but I was like, how am I ever gonna get to the city? I didn't even have my license till 2019. Like, I didn't even learn how to drive until I was 26. So, is it? Yeah, like 26. I think I was about to turn 27. So yeah, it was, it was not gonna happen, guys. So I ended up seeing that, and I ended up doing a lot of spells from that, like a few number of spells from there, things like that. I never really read much on witchcraft. The nearest bookstore to me was like run by a Christian dude, so it was like a very small town bookstore, and I was more interested in fiction at the time as well. And then on top of that, the next nearest bookstore was just a Chapters, which now has a lot of witchcraft books, but even when I first started university in 2010, there wasn't that much. It was Cunningham, it was Ravenwolf, and that's about it. You didn't even get many of the Llewellyn books like the other Llewellyn books that are really popular. You didn't even get those back then, really. Yeah, there's a lot of new age, but not as much witchcraft. So I grew up near that, like that bookstore was an hour away, and I don't drive, so not gonna happen. And my 10th grade seminar, I ended up doing my seminar. So a seminar is more like in this context, is more like an extended presentation. It's like a speech with a PowerPoint, and you're giving about a 20-minute lesson. And I ended up doing my 10th grade seminar on witchcraft and Wicca from what I could understand, what I could find on various websites, informational websites and things like that. I could not fathom what kind of information I was talking about, but I had one friend who was a Wiccan at the time, and he told me a little bit about some of the resources he used, things like that. So I ended up doing that seminar about it. So this was this weird time of being so young, being under 16, because even at the time, most covens or even groups would not accept people under 18. Even my local group does not accept people under 18 unless they are old enough to have a genuine interest in the craft themselves and they have permission from a parent. That is the way that we get around any of the legal stuff, because it still, could be illegal to do that kind of thing. That, as Thorn has mentioned, as Kara has mentioned, like, it is, yeah, it's a kind of scary, like, place to be in, doing that sort of thing. The exception we have is when it's like a family-oriented ritual and people who are members bring their children. That's pretty much the difference that we have with that. That's the people under about 16 that we'd allow, is the children of the adults, if it is a family-friendly ritual. So really, going from there, I don't even consider that my beginning into witchcraft. It is just literally the first thing that I can think of when I think of like actual tangible, this was witchcraft stuff I was doing. It wasn't until university when, actually, let's backtrack a little bit. I ended up wanting to finding a religion. I was like, I know that Christianity is not right for me. I was not raised Christian, really, but I was like, I know this doctrine, this information does not seem right to me. So I did so many quizzes online of like, what religion are you, and things like that. And the closest alignment that I could find to my views, because witchcraft was not listed on these quizzes, was Hinduism. So yeah, that's what I found. And in high school, a local acting group did Hair, the musical Hair. And when I went to see that, the Hare Krishna, like the Maha Mantra, got stuck in my head so much that I ended up looking it up, and I found ISKCON, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And I ended up working in Krishna consciousness for a very long time. Then in university, in my first year religious studies course, I ended up deciding, hey, I've got a friend now who's kind of a witch, and that's kind of interesting, that's kind of cool. I ended up writing an essay on the 70s, 80s, and 90s feminism movements and how that connected with the rise of witchcraft and neo-paganism. So I did a lot of research into Starhawk's work and other feminism. Starhawk is the main standout for me from that, especially since I'm now a reclaiming witch. That just stands out from that. But there was other people as well, and I remember writing this, and shortly after this, I ended up having a friend at the time, girlfriend at the time, who was like, hey, I think you might really like this witchcraft thing. I really recommend, she recommended to me, Wicca for the Solitary Practitioner by Scott Cunningham. So I ended up purchasing it, and I read it cover to cover, and I started practicing Krishna consciousness, which I had still been practicing at the time, in a very witchcraft style. I worked with Krishna as God and Radha as goddess. So I worked in that Wicca framework for a long time, that solitary Wicca framework, for a fair amount of time. Not as long as it actually seems like it was, but it was probably about 6 months or so. And then I got an invite from another friend who was a witch, that one who introduced me to reclaiming witchcraft. And this friend invited me to a Samhain ritual in 2012. And that is why I always say I started practicing my path in Samhain of 2012, because I went to that ritual and I have not looked back since. I went to that ritual, I connected so much with that ritual. I wrote a diary entry for that ritual for one of my creative writing courses, because we were doing creative nonfiction. So it was taking nonfiction, things that have actually happened to us, and writing it creatively as if it is a fiction piece. So I ended up writing about that experience for that. And yeah, going forward, I ended up helping plan Yule. Like, they were really, who wants to help plan? And I was like, sure. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'd love to help because this is really cool. So I ended up learning while doing by planning Yule with them. And that's pretty much where I've gone ever since. And it's been, that's why I say that Samhain 2012 was my original start date, because to me, that was very much, this is the date I actually was like, oh, this is witchcraft. I am doing witchcraft. This is my path. This is where I'm going. So that's why that is really the connection point for me. And from there, I find that that early introduction to the internet, that has definitely given me some pause when it comes to taking information from online. So that's one way that I approach things, because I remember myself taking these things from online and doing these things without any of the context or any of the knowledge or understanding. And honestly, I'm surprised nothing bad happened or anything bad occurred or resulted from that. Yeah, it was, and this is why a lot of times when people are like, oh yeah, I do witchcraft, but turns out they've only read like a couple of blogs, I'm like, and I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be like mean to other generations of witchcraft, and that's why I do have this feeling towards witch talk that feels very, I'm not averse to it, but like I'm very critical of the information that I take in, especially about witchcraft, because of all this stuff, because of my experiences with that. And then finally being able to learn from people, and the way that I learned from people was learning by doing. And instead of being completely book taught, like as Kara says, Kara was completely book taught for a long time. I did not have that experience. Like, the first two books I ever read in witchcraft were Wicca for the Solitary Practitioner and 12 Wild Swans. And the reason 12 Wild Swans was my second one that I ever read in the craft was because I was taking the Elements of Magic course, because we wanted to get everybody in the local community up to a certain point where we all had a certain level of understanding. So those were my first two. I've read a lot since, but those are my first two. And I missed the Silver Raven Wolf thing. I came to things when everyone was saying, never read Silver Raven Wolf. Silver Raven Wolf is trash. Her books are trash. Don't listen to her. And now that I'm getting some more nuanced information on that, because that was like early Tumblr, early witch Tumblr. Now that I'm getting more information from people who not only read Silver Raven Wolf as teens, but also have read them now, are authors, for example, Thorn, or people who I know to read very critically and to be very purposeful in the way that they take in information, such as Kara, telling me some very different things about Silver Raven Wolf and her works. And I'm like, okay, so now I'm almost like, I want to go back and read these things and be a little more critical, because I was just warned to not read them, so I ended up not reading them, because it's kind of like a Yelp review. It's like, oh, it's a 1-star restaurant, maybe I don't want to go there, even if that's because 12 people had a bad experience or didn't like a person who worked there or something. Gave it a 1-star review, so it drove all the reviews down. You know, this is the issue that we run into. And through university and knowing these people who read a little more critically, I've been able to better take things in with a grain of salt, and I would rather read everything than avoid everything people tell me to avoid. So, for example, I recently read The House Witch, and a lot of people love it, and a lot of people say they don't like it. And when I read it, I basically was like, okay, I like this part, but on the whole, it's not for me. Don't know what that means. If that just means that if that means it's a bad book, if that means that I'm beyond the information in it, if that means, not beyond as in like better than, but like, yeah, I've been there, done that kind of stuff. So I'd say those are the two main things that have influenced me a lot is my early 2000s, early mid 2000s witchcraft site, where I'm now like, okay, I need to be more critical of what I'm looking at here because of this experience I had over here, mixed with being reclaiming witch. So that is that lineage back to the 70s, but not just back to the 70s, but like the reclaiming community came out of Wicca. It came out of Dianic Wicca, and it came out of the fairy tradition. And while reclaiming witchcraft is not specifically a witchcraft tradition, no, it is a witchcraft tradition. Jesus, I can't talk. Where it's not specifically a Wiccan tradition, it does have its roots in Wicca, and it doesn't hide that fact. It tells you pretty much on reclaiming.org where it came from. So like having all these different ties, and I also read Christopher Penczak's blog, and it did mention a lot of this like fluffy bunny, like that coming out of that fluffy bunny thing, which I do still react in the, oh, that's all fluffy bunny stuff. I still react that way because that is the time that I started witchcraft, and that's what we see a lot. And I may have come into witchcraft through the Wicca lens, but then I like really quickly turned on Wicca and being like, I'm not a Wiccan, and being very specifically, I'm not a Wiccan. And now I'm like, I say I'm not a Wiccan because I am not a member of a Wiccan tradition. I'm not a member of a Wiccan tradition. I'm a reclaiming witch, and I'm a druid and obod. Those are my traditions. So I say I'm not a Wiccan. But if someone called me a Wiccan, I'd be like, whatever. I'm registered as a Wiccan at the hospital because pagan is not an option. It's kind of funny that Christopher's blog also mentioned the rise of eclectic, like the eclectic type thing in, I think it was the early to mid 2000s, and that's so true, because really, like, I do identify with the eclectic pagan thing because I absorb and I learn from so many traditions in paganism and Wicca, and those are my main two, being reclaiming and obod. But I'm so open to learning from others, and I have learned so much from Wicca as well because of Scott Cunningham and all these big name like writers. Scott Cunningham's the main one that comes to mind because he's the one I've actually read the most of when it comes to Wicca. I haven't read Thorne's book yet. Sorry, Thorne. Oh. It's on the list. It's on the list. The list is very big, and the pile is very big. And I'm going to be rereading 12 Wild Swans soon with Kara's group in Ohio. Not that I'm in Ohio, but I'm a member of that group just because I am a reclaiming witch, and I'm helping with trying to establish that community. So I'll be rereading 12 Wild Swans again, which will be interesting because I've fully read that book twice so far. The first time when I got it and did my class the first time, and then I probably read it again over the course of teaching the Elements of Magic course. And now I'm really interested to like read it just in a book club setting and see how that experience is. We'll see. But yeah, Witchcraft Generations, it's really hard to pinpoint where I'm connected to, but I think the most connection is that early mid 2000s zone, as Christopher Penczak mentions in his blog. If you don't know who Christopher Penczak is, clearly you've not watched my backlog of my YouTube videos, because I had an interview with Christopher Penczak several years ago after I met him at PantheaCon talking about herbalism and all that fun stuff. And yeah, I'll link Kara's video, Thorn's video, and Christopher's blog down below, because I think it's a really cool conversation. We can all kind of see where we come from and where our biases form as well. And as mentioned in the videos and the blog, this is not specifically about your generation as in like millennial or my Pluto's in Scorpio, that kind of stuff. It's not that sort of generation. It's more like when you came to the craft, because you will be affected from the information that's out there when you came in. So yeah, I think that's all I want to say on the topic. I just really wanted to put my 2 cents in because I thought it was just a fun topic. And I know I recently posted already, so who am I, a YouTuber or something? Probably not. It's not going to come back. I'm sorry. Also, it is full on spooky season. I don't care that it's September 1st. It's spooky season, folks. Anyway, my chihuahua is very sad at the window and wants me to come inside, so I'm going to bring him outside so that he can be with his mama. Anyway, bye guys. Love you lots. Bye.